An armature it's a concept devised from clay work. It's where if you have if you're sculpting the body out of clay and you want to do an outstretched limb or some sort of extension that the clay can't hold by itself, the armature is like this wireframe model that's within the clay that supports the clay's uh, sculpted form as it's, say, an outstretched arm, pointing arm, or something like that, that otherwise the clay would just fall to earth. So I suppose implied in that is the idea that in painting the armature, this harmonic system of proportion, of ratio, supports extreme compositions. It helps the arrangement and the placement of objects in a way that is pleasing to the eye. So that's the concept. And the harmonic rectangle is a way to divide any square or rectangle into a harmonic system of proportions. This geometric shape that is derived from breaking down the rectangle from its middle points and its diagonals creates a pattern, a shape, an armature, which has all kinds of subdivisions of the rectangle within it. And it's very helpful for laying out a large scale composition. The object is not to crucify one's composition upon the geometry, but there is a certain kind of guidance that comes from the rectangle, particularly deciding on placements that might otherwise be arbitrary. Of course, we must always follow our intuition, but it can be found that the rectangle can be found in many classical artworks where you can draw the rectangle on classical artworks that are very beautiful and find that it sort of approximates or meshes in quite well to the composition. Now, we can't say whether that is because there's a natural underlying harmony that we intuit when we place things and there's a feeling of rightness, or whether in many cases the artist actually drew the armature underneath the composition. We can try this out just on an A4 piece of paper with a ruler, and it helps to have a couple of different colored pens initially so that we don't get completely agog with the amount of lines that we have to draw, because it's easy to lose track. So let's have a look at that. And as you generate these points, these meeting points that are called occult centers, where that's really where three or more lines are converging. They create these points that can be used as points of correspondence that you can join between to generate all kinds of interesting armatures and patterns. And if it's suitable, it can be useful to create this in a composition with lightly drawn charcoal or sanguine or raw umber chalk that can be rubbed off at any point. We don't want lines that kind of blast through our canvas. It's not really necessary to paint them in. We might want to give some demarcations of those occult centers if we think we're going to use them, but certainly we don't want to, in most cases, like assert the geometry in a way that is going to be visible in the painting later on. So after measuring the midpoints on the X and Y axis, I cross over, so I create a kind of X going across the canvas through the middle, creating a middle point. And then right here, I'm taking the top middle and going to the bottom left. So I'm just using a very long ruler here because I'm working on a really big canvas. So it's two rulers taped together very awkwardly, but we use what we can. And so yeah, I'm just creating that. And then I will do the same thing. I will take the top middle to the bottom right. So this is just going to create a kind of upside down V or a triangle whose point is at the top. So I'm using a sanguine pencil here that I'll be able to rub off when I need, because I don't want it to be too strong. I don't want it to be blasting through my picture. So then I do the same. I go from the bottom middle to the top left. So top middle to bottom left and right, and then bottom middle to top left and right. It's just the same as on the piece of paper. So now I have a downward V and an upward V. So then I'll go from the top right to the left middle. So I'll be creating those V's that we talked about, but just on the different axis. Top left to right middle as well. So it's like creating of like left pointing and right pointing arrows or triangles. So right middle to bottom left. And then left middle to bottom right. So that's kind of it for the basic harmonic rectangle. And you'll see that you've got like 3 lines coming out from the corners, the top middle, and the left and right middles and the bottom middles. So you can count the lines and make sure there's 3 lines coming out from each of the corners and the middle points. And where they intersect, where you have 3 lines that are crossing, that's your occult centers. Now, you can explore it from there. There's no real kind of right or wrong or appropriate place to stop with this. It's just depending on how much you like the pattern and how much you think you'll use it. So here we can see the canvas with the ghosted or dusted off sanguine chalk, and I've got my armature.